I slowly ruined my husband's life when I found out about his cheating with my sister, but I turned my sister into the police for. I never thought it would happen to me. I've always considered myself a strong, level-headed woman, one who's not easily fooled. But here I am, writing this on Reddit because I found myself in a situation I never imagined in my wildest dreams. Let me backtrack a bit. My husband, Mark, and I have been married for 5 years. We've always been the kind of couple that everyone looks at and thinks they've got it all together. Our friends would always joke that we were the perfect pair, and maybe we were. We both work hard, enjoy our weekends, have a shared love of hiking, cooking, and spending lazy Sundays binge-watching whatever series we're into at the moment. At least that's what I thought. We got along well, laughed a lot, and at least from my perspective, we're in a good place. Or so I thought. But slowly, things started to shift. It wasn't a dramatic change. It never is it? It's always the little things that you ignore at first, hoping they're nothing more than a blip. Mark started getting more distant, but not in the way you might expect. It wasn't like he was avoiding me or acting like he didn't want to be with me. No, it was more subtle than that. He became quieter. The playful banter we used to share in the evenings faded into silence. When he came home, he was always a little more tired, a little more irritable. And at first, I just assumed it was work. Mark's job as a lawyer is demanding, and he often worked long hours, but he'd always tell me everything was fine. It started with the longer hours, but that was easy to rationalize. He'd get home later than usual, but he always had an explanation. I got caught up with a case, I had to meet a client, or my personal favorite, I'm just really stressed out right now. But as time went on, those explanations started to wear thin. I began to notice other things, small things that didn't sit right with me. For instance, his phone. I don't want to sound like one of those paranoid, controlling wives who checks her husband's phone, but there was something about the way he started treating it. He used to leave his phone around the house, just like any normal person. I'd send him texts during the day or call him when I was out with friends, and we'd talk. But then, slowly, he started being more protective of it. He'd leave it face down when we were sitting together, and whenever he got a text or call, he'd immediately silence it and lock the screen. He'd even start taking it with him when he went to the bathroom. Now, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with being protective of your phone, but I knew this wasn't normal for Mark. I started to feel a little paranoid. It was so unlike him. He'd never been the type to be secretive. But I pushed those thoughts aside. After all, he was just stressed, right? He was dealing with a lot at work, and maybe I was overthinking things. I convinced myself it was nothing. But then, there was the change in his behavior at home. Mark had always been affectionate, nothing over the top, but we'd hug, kiss, and have long conversations about anything and everything. But lately, he seemed to pull away. He didn't seem as interested in our usual routine, like the long walks we'd take after dinner or the movies we used to watch together. I started noticing that even when we were physically close, he wasn't emotionally present. He'd nod along to my conversations, but seemed distracted. His eyes would dart to his phone, or he'd pull out his laptop to check work emails while we were talking. And it wasn't just the little things. His attitude started changing too. He became more irritated by small things I did, things he used to laugh off. I'd ask him if he wanted to go out for dinner, and he'd brush me off, saying he was too tired. When I tried to discuss what was bothering him, he'd get defensive and say I was nagging. Every time I tried to bring up how distant he seemed, he would just tell me I was imagining things, that it was all in my head, that I was being paranoid. The worst part? I started feeling like I was the problem. Maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe I was being needy. Maybe it was just me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something bigger than just stress or work. There was a distance growing between us, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it kept getting bigger. But I never imagined this, that the signs were pointing towards something far worse than I could ever have thought. That it all came to a head on an ordinary Thursday evening. I wish I could say that I was some sort of detective, digging through his things and playing Sherlock Holmes. The truth is I wasn't. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't expecting to find anything. But sometimes trouble just finds you. I'd been feeling off about Mark's behavior for weeks, but I was still trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. That all changed when I came home early from work one afternoon. I had just gotten off a conference call and decided to surprise him. He was usually home by now, and I thought maybe we could go for a quick dinner. When I walked in, I noticed his office door was closed, which was unusual. Mark liked to leave it open when he was working from home. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was in the middle of something and didn't want to be disturbed. But then, as I made my way through the house, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. His voice, but not the normal tone. It was softer, more intimate. Curiosity got the best of me. I slowly approached the office door, peeking through the small crack. There, through the small gap, I saw him. And to my horror, I saw her too. My sister, Emily. I couldn't breathe. My sister. The one person I trusted more than anyone. The woman I'd grown up with, the one who I'd spent hours talking to about everything under the sun, who knew all my secrets, who was supposed to be family. And there they were, sitting together, too close for comfort, the way they were leaning in, talking to each other with a familiarity that made my blood run cold. She had her hand on his leg, and he had his hand on hers. I froze. My mind raced. I didn't know what to do. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but my body just wouldn't move. The shock was too much to handle. I stood there, silent, watching as they continued to chat like everything was normal, as if I wasn't sitting just on the other side of that door, shattering in pieces. They weren't doing anything overtly sexual. Not at first, anyway, but the way they looked at each other, the way they laughed, the way they were together, it was so obvious now. How had I not seen it before? Had I been so wrapped up in my own life, so oblivious, that I didn't see the signs? I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent, trying to make sense of what was happening before me. I turned and walked away, still in shock, trying to steady my breathing. The worst part was that I didn't need to ask any questions. I didn't need to know exactly what had happened between them. I knew. The way they were acting wasn't the way two siblings should behave, and the way Mark had been acting recently suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. But what hurt the most was how utterly betrayed I felt. I had trusted them both. Mark, my husband, and Emily, my sister. How could they have done this to me? How long had this been going on? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. The house felt suffocating, like everything was closing in on me. My mind was a mess of anger, disbelief, and betrayal. But I had a plan. This was far from over that I didn't confront them right away. Part of me wanted to burst through that door, scream, and demand an explanation. But another part of me knew I needed to stay calm, at least for the moment. I had to think about what I was going to say and how I was going to handle this mess. But the more I thought about it, the more anger and rage built up inside me. I felt like my entire world had been ripped apart, and the people I trusted most had torn it to shreds. I waited until that evening. Mark came home late, as usual, like nothing had changed. His jacket was slung over his shoulder, and he looked tired but in his usual upbeat way. "Hey babe, how was your day?" he asked, like everything was fine, like he hadn't just been in my sister's arms not even an hour ago. It made my stomach churn. "Sit down," I said, my voice colder than I expected. He froze for a second, sensing something was off. "We need to talk." He sat down on the couch, his face puzzled, but there was a glimmer of concern in his eyes. "What's wrong? You're acting weird. Don't play dumb, Mark. I saw you. I saw both of you." He blinked. "Saw us? What are you talking about?" He was already trying to cover up. The lies started flowing before I could even finish. "You know exactly what I mean," I snapped. "I saw you and Emily. In your office. All over each other." His face went pale. For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked, like the reality of what he had done hadn't fully hit him. But that shock only lasted a second before he quickly shifted into damage control mode. "Oh, come on. You're overreacting," he said with a smirk, his voice dripping with arrogance. "It's not like that. We were just talking." "Just talking?" I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. "Mark, I saw you. The way you were touching her, the way you were looking at her. Don't try to tell me it was just talking." "I'm not stupid." He stood up, suddenly defensive, his hands held out like he was trying to push me back, but I wasn't having it. "It's not what you think. It's just, we were drunk, okay? It was a stupid mistake. Nothing happened. Nothing serious." My heart sank as I listened to his pitiful excuse. "Nothing serious? You've been sleeping with my sister, Mark. That's serious." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, his frustration growing. Okay, fine. It happened. But that doesn't mean I don't love you, Daria. It was a mistake, all right? You don't understand how complicated things have been with work lately, with everything. I've been stressed. I didn't mean for this to happen. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The way he tried to deflect everything, to make it seem like it was just some unfortunate slip-up. He wasn't even sorry. It was like he thought I'd just forget about it, forgive him. But I wasn't going to let him off that easy. So this is how it is now, huh? You cheat on me, then turn around like I'm the crazy one for being upset? And you think I'm just supposed to sweep it under the rug? My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I never said that. I'm just saying, can't we talk about this without jumping to conclusions? You're overreacting, I swear. You're such a liar. I cut him off. You always have an excuse. You always deflect, and now you're trying to make it seem like I'm the problem. Like I'm a crazy one. The more he talked, the angrier I got. He kept lying, kept acting like it was no big deal. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let him twist this into being about my overreaction. He had crossed the line, and I wasn't going to pretend like it didn't matter. Don't bother, I said, my voice low and calm now, trying to hold back the rage that was bubbling up inside me. I'm done here, Mark. You can lie, you can pretend it wasn't that serious, but I know the truth. And I'm not going to sit here and beg for your explanation. It's over. I stood up, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't just anger, it was a decision. I had decided that I wasn't going to take his lies anymore. His face dropped, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. It was almost comical. He wasn't expecting this. He was expecting me to cry, to beg, to feel sorry for him. But that wasn't happening. I had been humiliated, betrayed by the two people I trusted most in the world. And there was no going back. Mark didn't say anything else. He just stood there, watching me, his mouth opening and closing as if he didn't know what to say. But I wasn't interested in hearing any more of his excuses. I don't want to see you right now, I said quietly. I need space, and you need to start packing your things. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog. I wasn't crying every minute of the day, but the heaviness was always there, like an anchor pulling me down. I hadn't realized how much I depended on Mark. Sure, we'd had our problems, but I never thought it would come to this. The betrayal hurt in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just the infidelity, though that was a huge part of it. It was the fact that someone I trusted so deeply, someone who was supposed to be my partner in everything, had turned out to be the one who shattered everything. And my sister? She was supposed to be the one person who had my back, no matter what. She knew me better than anyone, and now she was the one stabbing me in the back. At first, I was numb. I didn't feel much of anything other than the need to make it through each day. But as the days passed, the reality of the situation began to sink in. It was like the floodgates opened, and I couldn't stop the feelings from rushing in. Anger, disappointment, confusion. It felt like I couldn't escape it. I went from feeling betrayed to feeling downright disgusted. How could they have done this to me? They both knew the importance of family, and to think they not only crossed the line, but had been sneaky about it, lying to my face. It made me sick to my stomach. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I'd been gaslight, how I'd been made to feel like the crazy one. For so long, I've been trying to figure out what was wrong, asking him if everything was okay, feeling like I was overreacting because he'd said everything was fine. But now I could see it all so clearly. As angry as I was also grieving. It wasn't just the loss of my husband, but the loss of my sister too. That was what hurt the most, and I don't think I fully understood that until much later. I felt completely isolated. What hurt even more was how easy it had seemed for them. Mark, with all his lies and excuses, and Emily, my sister, who was supposed to be loyal to me. They'd acted like everything was just a casual fling, like I was nothing more than a speed bump in their little affair. The way Mark brushed it off, it made me feel invisible, like I didn't even matter. And Emily? She hadn't even apologized. She just disappeared. The emotional impact hit me hardest in the quiet moments. Lying in bed, unable to sleep because my mind wouldn't stop racing. Remembering the way Mark used to hold me at night, the way we used to talk about our future. All of that seemed like a cruel joke now. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept going back to the images of them in the office. The way she had touched him, how she had looked at him with that look, the one that I thought was meant only for me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let them both deceive me like that? And then there were the thoughts that kept sneaking in. What did they talk about? How long had this been going on? I kept replaying every moment of our life together, every interaction, trying to pinpoint where I had gone wrong, try to find the clue I had missed. I hadn't been able to find it. Maybe I never would. But the hardest part was seeing how easily Mark went back to his normal routine, how he acted like nothing had changed. It was like he expected me to just forget that he had destroyed everything, forget how my family had betrayed me, forget all the lies. It made me so angry, so bitter. I wasn't going to let it go. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It lingers. It eats away at you slowly, quietly, until you realize how much it has changed you. And with every passing day, I felt myself changing. I wasn't the woman I was a week ago. I wasn't the woman I thought I was. But the anger, the sense of betrayal, it gave me clarity. It wasn't just about getting revenge on Mark and Emily anymore. It was about regaining control over my life. It was about taking back my power, about making sure I never let anyone, especially those I loved, treat me like this again. I had to make a decision. I could keep wallowing in my sadness, keep letting them hurt me, or I could do something about it. I wasn't going to let their actions define me. I wasn't going to be the victim. The anger kept me awake at night, but it also kept me sharp. I realized that if I was going to get through this, I couldn't just sit around and let Mark and Emily have the upper hand. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this without facing the consequences of what they had done. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up for myself and for the dignity I had left. Mark had already done enough damage to our marriage. The lies, the manipulation, the way he made me question everything, it had to end. But it wasn't enough for me to just walk away. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done. I wanted him to see the consequences of betraying me, not just in our relationship, but in every aspect of his life. I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. I had been blind, I had been trusting, and I had let him think he could do whatever he wanted without any repercussions. That was my mistake, not anymore. I started with Mark. I wasn't going to let him leave without a piece of what he'd stolen from me. So I went through his things, all his emails, his text messages, anything I could find that would expose him for who he was. The more I searched, the angrier I got. The evidence was right there in front of me, clear as day. And I was going to make sure everyone else saw it too. He wasn't just going to get away with this. I started by calling some of his colleagues, people who had once respected him, people who had been close friends. I didn't go into all the gory details, but I told them enough. I made sure they knew about his infidelity, about how he had let his personal life affect his work. Some of them were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. Apparently, his behavior had been slipping at work for months, and no one had said anything. I wasn't trying to ruin his career, but I knew how important it was to him. And I knew how much it would hurt him if his colleagues began to question his professionalism. His reputation meant everything to him, and I was going to take it from him. As the days passed, Mark became more frantic. He started showing up at my work, texting me nonstop, begging me to talk to him. At first, I ignored him, but after a while, I realized I could use this to my advantage. I wasn't going to make it easy for him, so I played along. I kept his hope alive, just enough to make him believe he could fix it, just enough to make him think I would forgive him. The more he tried to justify his actions, the more I dug in. I let him beg. I let him apologize over and over. But with each apology, I only got angrier. But it wasn't just Mark I was going to make pay. Emily had crossed a line that I couldn't just ignore. She was my sister, the one person who was supposed to have my back no matter what. But instead, she betrayed me in the worst way possible. So, I decided it was time for her to face the consequences too. I didn't just want to make her feel bad. I wanted her to understand that there were real consequences to her actions. So, I went to the police. I didn't accuse her of anything directly, but I told them everything I knew. The affair, how it had started, how it had affected me, how it was all wrapped up in deceit. They took it seriously. While I wasn't sure what would come of it, The fact that she had crossed such a boundary, and had done so with complete disregard for me, made me realize that I couldn't just let it slide. I had to make her understand that this wasn't just something that could be swept under the rug. As the days went on, I could see that Mark was unraveling. His friends were distancing themselves, his co-workers were starting to look at him differently, and the weight of the situation was finally starting to settle on him. He came to me one last time, pleading for another chance. But this time, I didn't even want to hear it. "I can't fix this, Mark," I said quietly, my voice firm. "You broke it. You broke us. And now you have to deal with the consequences." The look on his face was priceless. He had no more excuses, no more lies left to tell. He was defeated, and for once, I was the one in control. As the weeks went by, I watched Mark's life crumble around him. It wasn't just the fallout from his affair. It was everything. The slow loss of his friends, the cold treatment from his family, the strained interactions with his coworkers. Every attempt he made to reach out was met with indifference or outright rejection. It was clear that his lies had caught up to him in a way he never expected. But it wasn't just Mark who was suffering. Emily, too, was feeling the weight of everything. She had always been my sister, my confidant, and now she was a stranger. The police didn't press charges, at least not yet, but I knew the investigation was a reminder to her of the mess she had created. The fact that I had reported her, even if she didn't face immediate consequences, was enough to make her feel the sting of betrayal. And as much as I hated that she was now paying for her actions, I knew she deserved it. She had helped destroy the foundation of my life, and now she had to live with the knowledge that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. But here's the thing. In all of this mess, in all the pain and the betrayal, I started to realize something. I started to understand the power of reclaiming my life. The first days after I confronted them were the hardest. I cried more than I thought I ever would. I felt more broken than I imagined possible. But it wasn't until I started taking control, until I started acting instead of reacting, that I began to heal. There's something empowering about taking your pain and turning it into strength. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. And the best part? I realized I didn't need either of them. I didn't need Mark's apologies. I didn't need Emily's excuses. What I needed was my own peace. For months, I'd been in a constant battle with myself, torn between wanting to forgive and wanting to make them feel the hurt they had caused. But when I finally let go of that need for revenge, when I stopped trying to punish them for what they'd done and started focusing on myself, that's when the healing really began. Mark and Emily were still in the picture, but they no longer had a hold on me. I had walked away, not just from them, but from the version of myself that had allowed their betrayal to define me. I was no longer that woman, the one who had been blind to the lies, the one who had begged for love and loyalty. I was someone else now, someone stronger. And here's the thing I learned that I want to share with anyone reading this. Don't let someone else's betrayal define who you are. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will leave scars. But in time, those scars will heal. And when they do, you'll realize that what you thought was the worst thing that could happen to you might just be the best thing that ever happened. It forces you to see who you really are, to find strength you didn't know you had, and to rebuild your life in a way that's more authentic to you. I've learned not to look back in anger, but to move forward with my head held high. Mark and Emily? They can keep their lies, their guilt, and their broken lives. I've got my own life to live, and it's a hell of a lot better without them in it. So, if you're reading this and you've been betrayed, don't let it eat you up. Don't let them take away your peace. Take control, make the hard decisions, and don't be afraid to walk away. The people who hurt you might never understand the strength it takes to move on, but trust me, you will know. And that's all that matters.